Well, hello and welcome back to AASR Live. My name, of course, is Guy Stevens. I'm the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. Really excited to be here. I feel like we actually had a couple of changes in our schedule, so I feel like I haven't been here for a while, haven't had an opportunity to do any of these live events, and I was really greatly enjoy these. So hopefully you will as well. For those of you that may not be familiar with the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint, we're a nonprofit organization started a little over 4 years ago. We focus on issues not only restraint and seclusion, but often a lot of the punitive things that are being done to kids, very often the name of behavior. So it might be restraint, seclusion, suspension, expulsion, corporal punishment, and even more broadly, it's a lot of the misguided and outdated approaches that are out there around behavior management that can be harmful. And we work to change policy, to change law, and also to educate and to support families. So if you are here with us live, I am, as always, really excited because I have to admit that I enjoy doing these quite a bit. It's always a lot of fun for me, and it's a lot of fun to have a really exciting guest on, and today is no exception. Really excited to have with me today Connie Persike, who is going to be giving a special presentation, and we're going to be having a discussion as well. Connie is a highly experienced speech pathologist and educational consultant, and so much more, and someone that has a core belief around how important connection and collaboration are and how that can lead to endless possibilities. So before I bring Connie on for her introduction, I'll just mention a little bit of housekeeping. One, as always, today's session is being recorded, and we record them for a couple of reasons. One, because we know everybody can't watch here live when we do them. We do them typically on Thursdays at 3:30 Eastern time, but I happen to know from experience that we have people that watch all over the world, and it's not always easy to watch it, in the middle of the night. So we do record these so you're able to watch them later, but we also record these because we want you to share them with, if you're a parent, share them with other parents. If you're an educator, share them with other educators. We really want people to spread a lot of these ideas in the work that we're sharing here. So they are recorded. You can find them after the fact on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and we have it available as an audio podcast, which you can download and listen to on Spotify, on Google Music, on iTunes, whatever your favorite audio podcast platform is. And with that, I'm going to introduce our special guest. But before I do, if you're watching now and you are live, tell us who you are and where you're from. So in the chat, leave us a comment, and I already see a comment. Look at that, Ginger Healy. My friend and colleague Ginger already left a message and said Connie is amazing. She is a world changer, and that's coming from another world changer there. If you happen to be on live as well, tell us who you are and where you're from, and would love to hear from you. So with that, let me go ahead and bring Connie up. And we now have Connie join us. Hey, Connie, it's great to see you, and really excited to have you here today. I'm going to read through a little bit of your bio, and then I'll get to the really important stuff beyond just kind of the bio. Of course, you are a speech language pathologist. You're highly experienced and educational consultant. You have over 20 years of experience working in educational settings. You hold a certificate in instructional coaching, positive education, applied educational neuroscience. And of course, you've served as a member of a multi-state work group to help develop common core essential elements for English language arts. You're a published writer for Autism Parenting Magazine. You also write for Exceptional Needs Today. You've created a really innovative process to assess student behavior, the Y Toolkit. Maybe you can tell us more about that later, which really moves away from the traditional behaviorism approach to behavior and really aligns well with kind of relational and neuroscience based approaches while being trauma sensitive and really neurodiversity affirming. And of course, you kind of, work with this guiding mission or philosophy that connection and collaboration equal endless possibilities. And of course, that's just a little bit of a bio there. I've gotten the privilege to get to know you over the last few years. And in addition to all those wonderful things, I consider you also a friend and a colleague and somebody out there doing amazing things. And of course, we've had an opportunity to work in a bunch of different areas. So we are really excited to have you here today. Some people are already jumping on board to tell us where they're from. We've got somebody here from Houston, Texas, and Fairfax County, Virginia. That's actually not too terribly far from me. And I'm sure we'll have more people joining us as we kind of get moving here. So with all of that, welcome and thanks for being here today.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So you have a really, I think, meaningful and exciting presentation that you're going to share with us. And of course, we'll have the ability for people to ask questions. And of course, I'll probably throw some questions at you. And I had an opportunity to see you present something very similar to this a while back. And it really was impactful, So without giving a whole lot more intro here, I'm going to go ahead and pull up your slide deck so that everybody can see it. And I'm going to let you take over and present this, and I will disappear, but if you need me at any moment, I will pop back up on the screen. And what we'll do is after you get done kind of going through the presentation, we'll open it up for questions or comments that people might have. And I do encourage people, feel free to put questions in the chat at any time. We might wait to get to those at the end, but feel free to kind of put them in the chat as you think of them, and even comments, and we'll kind of review those as well. So one last request of the audience, and then Connie, the stage is yours to take away. And I would just ask again, if you are watching live, tell us who you are and where you're from. It's always great to know where people are joining us from today. So with that, Connie, I'm going to disappear and welcome you to get started with your presentation.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks.
So this is a topic that I'm really passionate about. I love books. I especially love picture books for children. I love using them to teach, especially teaching around social emotional skills. I think they're a great tool and technique to use to teach students and kids, my own daughter. So, I was thinking about our classrooms and the books that are in our classrooms, and it kind of activated me to present this topic about welcoming neurodivergence by using picture books to support acceptance and belonging. For those of you who know me, I have an identical twin sister. She's a literacy person. She's a literacy coach, she was a reading teacher. She is an instructional person in her district around literacy. And so she loves books. And she taught me all about text sets and how to group books together based on a topic, and then, use those to really teach students, which I absolutely fell in love with because I'm a speech pathologist. I love categorizing things. And so I started creating all these text sets around neurodiversity at different levels, picture books for younger kids, early readers for, elementary, and then chapter books. And those are all on my website. You can go to my website. There's text sets there for different variety of topics. But specifically today, we're going to talk about how we can use books to support acceptance and belonging in our classrooms. And so we've come a really long way in this discussion around equity, around diversity in children's books and other marginalized groups by, such as by race and culture and gender and sexuality, but we're really lagging behind both in the research and in the literature around disabilities and, how to increase those in our classroom. There's less books available for teachers, for parents. And so I really wanted to bring this to light and to have a really nice conversation about it or talk about it. So please throw any questions out there. I'd love to answer them at the end, and I'll just jump in. So before I get started, I do want to go over terminology because I want to make sure everybody knows that I'm going to be using identity first language. As many of you know, especially the followers of the Alliance Against Exclusion and Restraint, many individuals see their neurodiversity or their disability as a part of their identity. And self-advocates really celebrate their differences by using identity-first language. So today you're going to hear me using identity-first language, such as autistic individual, disabled student, neurodivergent individual. That's me using identity-first language to honor and respect and celebrate their differences. Neurodivergent, I think in the neurodiversity conversation and world, terminology can get mixed up pretty easily. So I just want to go over a few terms for you. Neurodivergent means a person whose brain diverges from what is considered to be typical. Some examples would be autism, ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, dyslexia, stuttering, epilepsy, apraxia. Those are just a few examples. So neurodiversity, and you'll hear those words kind of interchangeable, but they do mean different things. So again, those neurodivergent is a person whose brain diverges from what is considered to be typical. Neurodiversity is just that all brains are different. That's okay. Differences are a natural variation of the human world, and we should celebrate that. To be neurodiversity affirming is the belief that diversity and differences and how we think, how we feel, how we behave, and relate to other people are what makes us unique. And that's all people are equal. One brain doesn't trump another. All people are equal. We're all worthy, and we're all valuable to society. You might also hear me saying, instead of nonverbal, I will be using the word non-speaking, which just means that someone does not use traditional words to communicate. They might use sign language, they might use assistive technology, but they just don't always use words to communicate. So then I will be using the word non-speaking. Okay, so before we jump in, I really do want to talk about the difference between belonging and acceptance, because I don't think that we always think about that. I don't think that's always clear to us. And my goal for all students, for all people, is that they really feel like they belong. And so belonging is very different than acceptance. When you're accepted exactly for who you are by the members of a group, so when we're talking about students, by those people in your classroom and in your school, that's belonging. If you feel the need to change things about you so that you can be accepted, that's fitting in. And if you want more information about that, Brene Brown has done a lot of research and a lot of talks about that. But my goal is for students and all people to really feel like they belong to their group and not have to change in order to fit in. So why is this important? Well, there's a lot of research out there that says loneliness and social exclusion impact self-control, and it increases aggression. So if our students don't feel like they're accepted, they don't feel like they have, oh gosh, you guys, I just messed up. I'm sorry. Belonging and acceptance means when you're accepted for exactly who you are. Fitting in is when you have to change who you are to feel like you're belonging. And so I screwed that up, but I wanted to correct that really quick. I'm sorry. All right. So why is belonging and acceptance important? So basically, if our students don't feel like they're belonging to their community, their school community, even their outer world, their community, their neighborhood, loneliness and social exclusion impacts self-control and increases aggression. And a lot of the work I do in schools is around behavior and supporting students to help them, help teams support students who might be having some behaviors that are interfering with their learning. And so this is really important to me. If we can help them belong and help them feel accepted, then we can decrease some of that aggression that perhaps we're seeing. Social pain, there's been research, and I have all this cited for you, but there's been research that shows social pain caused by social exclusion is similar. It impacts us in the same way neurologically as physical pain does. A strong sense of school belonging has so many positives. It increases a student's self-worth. It increases their emotional well-being. If they have a lack of school belonging, or they don't feel like they have a sense of belonging in their community, in their school, then we're going to have more behaviors, we're going to have more violence, and we're going to have increased dropout rates. And again, this is all based on research. I have it cited for you in the slides, and I'll share the slides with Guy afterwards so that you have a copy of it. And so we can use representation in children's literature to affect one's sense of belonging. So many disabled adults describe their childhood, who talk about their childhood and describe it, and talk about coming to terms with their impairment. They talk about how that was a minor issue for them compared to coming to terms with their impairment and their disability was minor compared to the feelings of social isolation, the feelings of segregation, the feelings of pity, the feelings of being rejected. And so it's really impactful when somebody doesn't feel like they belong. And so when children see characters that are different from themselves in a way that allows them to become immersed in their life experiences, their ability to see and understand and value other people is enhanced. So picture books featuring characters with a wide range of diversity can promote equity, it can promote acceptance, positive examples, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I have thoroughly looked through all of the picture books that I'm recommending, and I bought all of them. I've returned a lot of them that I didn't feel were positive examples, and there are a lot out there, surprisingly so. But if we have picture books with positive examples of neurodivergent individuals, then we can increase the probability of them being accepted. When children see themselves or their experiences mirrored in characters, their ability to value themselves is enhanced. And I think this is really important. Children recognize unfairness and injustices way earlier than we think that they do. They catch on to that and they notice that at very young ages. Trust me, my company does a lot of behavior audits for school buildings, and we survey students. And one of the questions we ask students is, do you think people like you are treated fairly in your school? And these kids notice that. They have such beautiful responses to the things that they're noticing. So it's definitely noticed at a much younger age than we think. They notice when people are being left out. They notice when they're disregarded. And then if there's no books that mirror you, you feel disregarded. You feel like you're not being noticed or seen. So sharing books that have positive portrayals of neurodivergent individuals can impact the belief of peers, but it also trickles down. There's a trickle-down effect where it impacts their caregivers, their parents, their teachers that all encounter these books. It also plays a really important role. Seeing yourself mirrored in a book plays a really important role in developing a child's identity, their self-efficacy, their self-worth. And then underrepresentation creates a sense of not belonging. And this is really important. And I don't think we talk about this enough. But if certain groups are overrepresented, it creates a sense of greater importance in the space. And so when we think about our classrooms and we think about the students that are portrayed in our books, they're typically kids who are neurotypical. And then it creates this sense of greater importance to those students in the space, which I think is equally damaging as underrepresentation creating a sense of not belonging. Okay, so by incorporating picture books with strength-based representation of neurodivergent characters, we can promote a respect and dignity of all children. It also really sends a message that you're important to society, that you matter, representation does, and that everyone is different and that's okay. So why is this important? Out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is right near me. I'm from Wisconsin in Waunakee, a small town near Madison. But they have a center called the Cooperative Children's Book Center at the University of Wisconsin. And they actually track how many books have neurodivergent characters, main characters, primary characters, or significant secondary characters. We don't think the data is available yet for 2022 or 2023, but the 2022 data showed that 1.8% of books that came out that year had a neurodivergent primary or secondary characteristic. The number of students in our schools, age 3 to 21, who receive special education under IDEA, that is 7.2 million, or 15%. The average population of students with disabilities or disabled students in all of our public schools is at 15%. And so definitely underrepresented in our books. 15% of the population, 1.8% of neurodivergent characters. Now, that might be a little bit higher if you start calculating disabled characters also. I specifically just pulled the data for neurodivergent individuals or characters. And our schools don't track by neurodivergence. They track by disability, school educational labels. So without accurate representation, children feel excluded. They feel as if they're not allowed in the spaces that the books represent. And then again, when a segment of society is excluded from literature, the implication is that group is without value. I don't know why I struggle with that word. And so, whoops, I don't know what just happened. Sorry, I lost my tabs. Okay, so there's many different ways that we can use picture books to show diversity and to represent our students. They can be used, and this is Bishop back at, this has been around for a long time, but a lot of people outside the literacy world haven't heard these analogies, but we can think about this analogy as, books can be used as mirrors, they can be used as windows, and they can be used as sliding glass doors. So when you think about mirrors, we want to make sure we have books that represent each and every one of these for our students. So books can be mirrors. They can mirror a child's lived experiences so that they can see themselves represented in that book, and that validates their experiences. Books can be seen as windows. They can provide windows so that we can see into other people's lives, into other people's different lived experiences. This is really important when it comes to building empathy and helping our young people start understanding and having that perspective of different lived experiences. And they can be considered sliding glass doors. So they can take children in and out of different situations, helping them imagine themselves with a different future than they maybe previously had imagined. So it can help students see themselves in different situations than perhaps they might never have envisioned for themselves. So now, how do we do this? I'm going to go through, there's no absolute correct way, but I pulled from several different research articles and researchers to give you some important techniques that perhaps you could use. And I'm also going to help you get to some resources so that you can, if you don't want to do the work of reading all the books and determining if these are positive representations of your students or of your child, there's a lot of resources out there that you can go to and kind of find those places. This is an example of one of my early elementary neurodiversity text sets. Those are all free on my website. You can, I tried really hard to give priority to disabled authors or neurodivergent authors and or illustrators, because oftentimes then the representation is much more authentic and genuine. But some of them, if I thought they were really, really good and they were written by a neurotypical individual, I still have those in there. But I definitely did give preference to our neurodivergent authors or illustrators. Okay. So some tips and cautions. The first thing I want you to think about is that picture books can have a focus on neurodivergence to either help increase or educate other people and help them understand a disability or a neurodivergence. However, it's really equally important for us to show books and expose students to books with neurodivergent characters who are not solely defined by their disability or by their difference. They don't evoke sympathy. They don't promote the belief that neurodivergence is something that needs to be overcome. Those are books that we don't want to include. These are a little bit harder to find in picture books just because the plots aren't always, picture books are for younger kids. They don't always have a really complex plot, but I do have a few examples that I'm going to show you. Across history, representation of neurodivergent individuals or disabled individuals even, the role that those books have taken is that we have to have pity for them or sympathy for them, or we need to, or those books used to highlight the kindness of other people for, including that neurodivergent individual or that neuro individual child. So we want to try to, we definitely want to avoid those. No representation is better than bad representation. So try to focus on picture books written by neurodivergent individuals or disabled authors, because that can ensure adequate representation. I'm going to talk a little bit later on about how Pound Own Voices can help you with that. However, there are a lot of people moving away from that, and I'll talk about that coming up here. But many books written by neurodivergent authors are neurodiversity affirming. And so that's the kind of books that we want to put into our classrooms and bring into our environments if you're a parent. So when it comes to making sure that we have characters that aren't solely defined by their disability or their neurodivergence, we want to make sure that they're involved in everyday events and adventures, that they are, in settings that neurotypical kids would be in settings for. So we want to make sure we have a little bit of both. I'm not saying the books that are here to educate us about neurodivergence is bad, but we want to make sure that we have both opportunities of literature. And I'm going to get into specifically the differences between those two types of literature. Okay, so a little bit more about neurodivergent authors. According to Lee and Lowell's 2019 diversity survey, 11% of authors are disabled. Now that might be low because some people may not feel safe to share their neurodivergence. They might not, they definitely don't have to. That's not something that they have to do. And so that might be an underrepresentation. If they don't want to share that, that should be respected. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, 26% of the adults in the United States have some type of disability. Again, that's about disabilities, not neurodivergence. So we're not really comparing apples to apples, but I think they're probably close enough that we can see that neurodivergent authors are also underrepresented. There are less of them than neurotypical authors. And so again, that's one of the reasons I really like supporting their work. Not only are they more likely to be neurodiversity affirming, I also want to support our neurodivergent authors. Okay. So some resources for you to be able to find some authentic representation. A Novel Mind is a website that you can go to. It explores literature that has representation of diversity in general. It's, they also bring in books about just, all brains are different. So not just neurodivergence, but also mental health. So I think this is a really nice website for those of you who are interested in making sure you have representation beyond just neurodivergence. They are developed and maintained by neurodivergent individuals, and they're not really they're really about just gathering them all right now. They're not about qualitative reviews yet. It's just a comprehensive list about what's all out there. Some of their people that are maintaining it also have mental health diagnoses. So again, it's really nice that this website is maintained and ran by neurodivergent individuals, but they aren't yet sorting them by quality yet, or they're just looking at quantity at this point. They just want to get a comprehensive list. I think that is their goal for the future also, although supportable solutions, I have text sets. I mentioned that my website has text sets and some reflection questions for all ages. I've sorted them by age group. And I definitely had an emphasis on neurodivergent authors when I put those together. Now, I told you we were going to talk about that Pound Own Voices. That was a term coined by author Corinne. I'm not going to try to say her last name because I don't want to say it wrong, but referring to books, just any books about characters from underrepresented underrepresented marginalized groups. So it's not just neurodivergent groups, but it's if the author is writing about a marginalized group, they also identify within that group. So they're writing about their own experiences. Now, I'm going to talk about another website coming up here that used to use that a lot, and they've moved away from it just because some authors started feeling like they were being exploited for their difference, and not everybody felt safe sharing that with the world, and nor should they feel like they have to. And so it's kind of fading away. However, you might still see it out there. And then Megan, not an autism mom, she has 100 book list on autism and neurodiversity. She has vetted those all by autistic adults and their allies. And so that's definitely a free website, a free resource you can go. She makes sure to promote books that only promote inclusion, and they're moving away from ableistic views, and they really are focused on neurodiversity affirming characters and books and representation. So those are some resources that you can go to. We Need Diverse Books is the website that I was talking to you about that's kind of moved away from Pound Own Voices, but it's a nonprofit organization that advocates for change in the industry to produce and promote literature that reflects and honors the lives of all young people. So when I say there's resources on own voice authors, that's been recently removed, so that's no longer accurate. But it's a great website, and it has all sorts of different marginalized groups represented, not just neurodivergent individuals or neurodivergence. Okay, so how else can we do this? As I said before, the picture books can feature neurodivergent main characters, neurodivergent secondary characters, and neurodivergent background characters. Now it's going to be a little bit harder to have background characters who are neurodivergent and for us to notice that because they don't always look different. And so at the picture book level, this will be much harder to find. You're more likely to see that for people, disabled individuals who are in wheelchairs, although you might be able to see someone with a cochlear implant. Those are the kind of things in the background. They're not a main character. Okay, so the story can be about their neurodivergence, about their strengths, and about their differences. That's called inclusive literature. Remember when I was going back, the point of that is a few slides before I was talking about how that's the purpose is to promote acceptance, promote understanding. That's called inclusive literature. And we also have books that the neurodivergence can just be incidental. The character just incidentally has a neurodivergence. And so that's called immersive literature. The focus is on a totally different topic. It's not about the person's difference. It's not about their neurodivergence. They're just a character who happens to be neurodivergent. So we want to make sure we have both in our settings. Again, that can be a little bit harder to have immersive literature at the picture book level. So inclusive literature, the purpose is to teach, it's to raise awareness and acceptance and be able to promote acceptance of differences and help people tolerate differences more. The characters are disabled and they're defined by their disability. The assumed audience is non-disabled people or neurotypical people, and ableist norms. It's really trying to counter ableist norms. The portrayal is disability is to be tolerated and accepted by non-disabled individuals. This is a really nice example of a picture book that is just beautiful. It has a main character who has Down syndrome, and that character is just about him and his dog and how much his dog misses him when he goes to school. And so it's a great book. It's not about his Down syndrome. The character it doesn't even ever say, I don't think it even says that the character has Down syndrome. So it's a really great book. I love it. It's one of my favorites. I actually have 2 of them because I thought it was so beautiful. And then we can also have immersive literature. Again, this is to engage children and show characters that are fully engaged in life. That's the purpose. The characters have a disability, but the disability does not define their character. The audience is all children, disabled and non-disabled or neurodivergent and neurotypical. The research is really around disability, so that's why I'm saying disability in this, because I'm pulling from research. And disability is not the focal point of the story. It's incidental. There's no moral or educational message about the disability there. The lived experience or disability is depicted accurately and authentically, and being different is normal because all human beings are individual and different. So that's kind of immersive literature. This is a great example because dyslexia is definitely underrepresented in our literature. And I wanted to show you a beautiful example of that. Oh gosh, you guys, I have these, my gosh, I'm just messing up today. I have these reversed. So this is the example of inclusive literature. And the other one is the example of immersive literature. My goodness, I'm sorry. My brain is not working today. It's summer, so please give me grace. But this is a beautiful book about, and it's co-written by a little girl with dyslexia and her mother. And it's the story about her and her dyslexia, and it's strength-based. It's really beautiful. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how certain disabilities are underrepresented. And usually they're the more common disabilities like dyslexia or learning disabilities in our schools. And so I wanted to make sure I showed you an example of that. Those of you who know me know I hate making mistakes, so this is going to drive me nuts all day. Anyway, so immersive literature is much preferred by non-disabled and disabled communities. They're just more engaging to read about. And so again, it is harder to find in picture books. So I wanted to give you a few examples of early readers for you. Mina is a whole series about a little girl with epilepsy. Epilepsy is not the foundation of the story or the plot. Her difference is not, it's just incidentally mentioned throughout. And same with Finkel, the many mysteries of the Finkel family. Those girls have autism and they are artistic and they are trying to solve mysteries. Really cute series. And then Emma Every Day has a cochlear implant, and the book does not focus on that. It's definitely a beautiful example of immersive literature. There's a whole series of Emma Everyday books. My daughter loved them. My daughter loved all of these actually, and reading about these when she was younger. And so I wanted to share some early literature books for you. Okay, so if you're going to use inclusive literature, again, that's where it's focused on the disability, and it's all about helping with understanding and acceptance and tolerance. We can kind of use some of these guiding questions to critically engage our students and our children in discussions about that. And so we could say, how are you like the main character? And how are you different? Those could be some questions we ask people. Which illustration would you redraw to reflect the lived experience of the character's life? How would you retell the story from the character's perspective if it isn't written from the character's perspective? How would you, or even if it is, you could have like, hey, from what your experiences, how would you retell that story? What are some barriers faced by people with the characters' differences? Great questions that you can use to mediate inclusive literature. Some questions to ask yourself when you're choosing books. I think this is really important because, again, we want to make sure that we're using books that portray people in a positive light, neurodivergent individuals in a positive light. So does the book author offer authentic and meaningful representation of our neurodivergent individuals? Can children with or without neurodivergence see meaningful similarities between themselves and others in the books? Do they offer a respectful representation of neurodiversity? Does the storyline acknowledge in some way the main character's identity without the story and theme being about trauma or the injustice of their difference or an obstacle facing that individual? Of course, everybody has obstacles. So if we just don't want it to be solely loaded on like, oh, this difference of theirs is a huge obstacle that they have to overcome. Because remember, in history, that's what we've seen in the past. And I think there's many more neurodiversity affirming books coming out. than there ever has been. And so we don't have to use those books. We don't want to use those books anymore, where it's just focused on the trauma of their disability and the injustice of it all and this obstacle that they have to overcome. There's no flawless criteria to help you pick good literature for your setting, but hopefully these questions can kind of guide you and help you find, just give you some sort of self-talk and some questions you can ask yourself to help you out. Okay, so suggestions. These are just some suggestions for ensuring adequate and authentic representation. Because again, in the past, this has been really difficult to find. And we definitely want to be including diversity in our books year round. We do not have to, like my daughter's school had Neurodiversity Week when it came to literature, and they started pulling out all their books with neurodiversity. We want those to be in the classrooms all year long. We don't want to have like a month of it or a week of it. We want it to be just embedded into our community. So select books that have people. Really interesting that there are more books with animals as a main character than there are neurodivergent characters. So we want to make sure, I think the most recent research was 26% of books had, remember, 1.8% had neurodivergent characteristics. And I think either that same year or shortly after that, 26% of books had animals as their main character. So we want to pick books with neurodivergent characters. We want to pick books that show our neurodivergent characters engaged in authentic, everyday activities. We want, if possible, to have picture books that have plots that aren't, that have plots that are good, represent good literature also. We want to also make sure that the literature in our classroom shows multiple depictions of the same group, because that's how we can counter some stereotypes. So we want to make sure we don't want to just have one book about a character, a Down syndrome character. We want to have bunches of different representations so that we don't have stereotypes being, embraced. We want to try to break stereotypes. As often as possible, try to use authors who are representing the same character. And then intersectionality is something that's really important. It refers to the idea that individuals have multiple identities. So students of color with disabilities, gender neutral individuals with a neurodivergence, non-speaking students of color. Students of color are overrepresented in special ed. Yet to be able to find a neurodivergent character who is also a person of color is very hard to find. And then I want to hit, when I'm talking about this, I want to also hit that oftentimes we have an overrepresentation of disabilities or neurodivergence of characters that are like low incidence disabilities in our school. So for instance, cochlear implants. You can find more books with kids with cochlear implants than you can with somebody with dyslexia. But dyslexia is probably the #1 disability in our schools. And there's very, very few books that have representation of a dyslexic characters. So we want to try to match our population also. We don't want to have, and they're doing it, autism used to be considered a low incidence disability in schools. I don't know that it still is. I would guess it isn't. But there's a lot more books about autistic characteristics than there are different, obsessive compulsive disorder or Tourette's syndrome. And so if you have a classroom that has kids made up of different neurodivergence, you want to try to have the representation in your book match the population of your groups also. And so think about that as well. I do want to, and I know most of you have probably already heard about this book, but when it gets to intersectionality, this is why this book is so celebrated and everybody was really excited about it coming out. It's an autistic boy who's non-speaking, and he also is a Black boy. And so this is a really nice picture book of somebody with multiple different identities. Again, those are so hard to find, and it's one of the reasons I'm so excited about that book. So A Day with No Words is the book title. Okay, so we definitely also want to use, and I said this, I sound like a broken record, strength-based views. When we use strength books that represent our characters in a strength-based way, we can counter ableism, which is one of my goals. So to do this, we have to help teachers get high quality literature that really either explicitly or inexplicitly kind of disrupts ableistic views. I oftentimes buy almost every year that my daughter has been in school, I buy her teacher one of these books for her classroom because I'm trying to, usually I buy more than one, but I'm trying to make sure that my daughter's classroom has some representation of different types of people. So we want to make sure that the books recognize the whole individual, that disability is just one aspect of someone's life in that book. We, typically in the past, books have been based on the medical model or like we need to feel, or charitable model, like we need to feel sorry for them. We need to highlight the character who's friends with that person who's neurodivergent because we should celebrate that person. They're becoming friends with a neurodivergent character. We want to avoid those. Researchers are really concerned with the scarcity of children's books that represent positive portrayals of characters with disabilities, because that lack of representation prompts a lack of acceptance and reinforces ableist inequalities. So if we can make sure we change the narrative of children by showing books that are really strength-based and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but that move in the social model of disability, then we can counter ableist views. So I do want to talk about the boy who lost his stim. I'm just going to jump ahead of that because that is a nice book that counters ableistic views. So this boy, was bullied and he was told he can't stim, and then he overcomes that and he realizes it's okay. He, connects with the autistic community and he realizes his stims can help him and he starts being more open about stimming. And so that's a really nice book that explicitly tackles some ableist views. All right. So we also want to ensure, how can we do this? How can some ways that you can make sure that you're using strength-based books or have books that have a strength-based lens is to use books that have confident characters. They accept their disability. They're not trying to overcome their disability or cure their disability. They're well-developed characters. That don't need to be pitied. They're not in need of charity or intervention. The character changes and grows throughout the book. Another reason I really love this book. He changes and he grows just like all of us do throughout the book. The character does. Individuals with, you want to try to get books where neurodivergent characters are with neurotypical characters. They're not in isolated settings. They're in the same kind of settings as our neurotypical children. That's another reason I really like Best Buddies. He is riding the bus with all the neurotypical students. He is in the same kind of settings as people who are neurotypical. So he has a similar life experience to them in many ways. Okay, and I talked about implicitly or explicitly tackling those ableist views already. Okay, so you can use picture books to also introduce children to the social model of disability versus the medical model of disability. And so just to quickly review, for those of you who haven't heard this, the medical model of disability views the individual as the problem. The focus is on impairment, their need for intervention and or a cure. The focus is on a need to be fixed or changed, and there's a lack of acceptance for who that person really is, and a lack of celebration of their uniqueness and their differences. Whereas the social model, and if we want to avoid those books that portray the medical model of disability, and we want to instead focus on the social model of disability. And so focusing on acceptance and of somebody with a neurodivergent character being their authentic self and feeling safe to be their authentic self. We want to view that character as being impaired by barriers in society and not their differences. We want to the book to be focused on support and self-advocacy versus intervention. And we want to teach that removing those barriers equal equity. I mean, I actually, for older kids, would probably use examples of picture books, that one example that portrays a medical model and another example that portrays a social model. And I would talk about that with older students. I use picture books to teach adults even, because I love them so much. And so many of them have such great messages. The Rabbit Who Listened is like a wonderful book to teach about empathy. I mean, I think so many adults even have a hard time knowing what empathy is and how to use empathy. And so like, that's another example of when I've used it for teachers, even like, hey, let's look at this book. And we talk about how, the rabbit is empathizing with the little boy. But anyway, so I would actually show different types of these literatures to older groups of kids. And we would talk about, which one is just depicting the character through the medical model of disability, which one's the social. And I would talk about what those mean so that kids can learn about the history of disabilities and learn about the difference and how we want to be focusing more on the social model of disability. Okay, I think that's it. And then I have a whole slew of references for you, because a lot of this was research-based.
Connie, that was fantastic. So I'm back, and as I was listening to you, I was remembering why, after I saw you give this presentation, I thought it was so important. What you're talking about here, representation matters. And I have a comment here that was put in the chat a second ago that I think really sums that up. This is from Jamie, who says, as a 30-year-old who has had Tourette's my whole life, I would have loved a character with Tourette's being represented in the classroom. I love that this is being talked about. Kids need representation. Yeah, absolutely, and it's so important. And I'm thinking a couple of ideas here that I want to run by you, but really appreciate the focus on this. And of course, the one thing we were able to do in person that we can't do is hand books around the room. But we need to figure out how to get more of these books to more places. So those of you that are watching live, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and I'll just share a couple other things that came up while you were presenting. We have somebody, Sydney, actually a volunteer with the Alliance, who is in Canada, that was joining us. And,
I love Canada.
Yeah. And Jamie, of course, who commented a moment ago from Nashville.
Jamie, it's still hard to find characters, books with main characters with Tourette syndrome. I've looked because people have requested it. And every time I do a live presentation, and like Guy said, we do like this little speed dating activity where everybody can see all the books that I have. Because I have a lot of them, and because I want people to get a glimpse of them, and I want them to see. Sometimes it's scary to buy the books when you don't know what they're like. But I almost always have an audience member asking me about books with characters who have Tourette's, and they are really hard to find. I think that there are a few on my tech set, but there's still not enough out there.
Well, maybe that means there's opportunity. Jamie, have you ever thought about writing something? So, and as I recall, Jamie is a member of our community here, and I think is an educator, as I recall. So, maybe there's an opportunity there. Chantel had joined in from Canada also. Chantel's our lead Canadian volunteer. So we had a number of people that kind of joined us. Also had a comment here from Chantel saying, amazing presentation. You're igniting that fire in me to write a children's book again. That would be fantastic. And I think as I was listening to the presentation, I mentioned a couple of thoughts running through my head. One of those, after kind of hearing what you were saying, Connie, was this idea that sometimes we have to be the change in the world that we want to see, even when we can't find it, which, really is why I started the Alliance, that there was nobody doing that. And so I'm kind of had this hopeful thought that, maybe somebody like Chantel or Jamie or somebody else might be inspired by this discussion. I think it's really important. The other thing I was thinking about is what we can do to get books, and I shared the links that you provided throughout the conversation. And of course, you have some amazing. In fact, Would you mind, because you've got your screen up, pulling up
sure.
your website and showing the what's on your website? If you could do that, that would be fantastic. But I guess the question was kind of running through my mind while you're looking at that was, how do we get these books in more schools, in more libraries? And of course, some of these answers are easy. Okay, great. I see you're navigating there. Putting requests into your local library. You've got some fantastic kind of graphics that work as one pagers that show. You want to walk us through that, and you can tell us what they are. But these would be
Yes.
great things to print and take to a library, wouldn't they? I mean, couldn't you do that?
Yes, absolutely. And
Okay.
I've had librarians in my talks when I do this live, and they are overjoyed. And so I find most librarians want to make sure they have representation of all types of people in their library. So they've been really excited about this. So I have a few adult text sets, actually. Here's one for perspectives of non-speaking individuals, all written by individuals, like non-speaking individuals, some who are autistic, some who are not. But I was motivated to do this because so many times, you guys, when I'm in a classroom observing, I'm seeing the adults talking about a student who is not speaking as if they can't hear, and really bothered me at such a high level, like that there's this lack of understanding that, hey, just because you can't speak doesn't mean you can't hear what you're saying about me right now. So I was motivated to go home and put this together so that I could add it to my consultation reports. And I add it all the time because it happens all the time. Like me, and I really believe that it's done not to be intentfully hurtful, but just because people don't think about the perspective of someone who is different than them. And so these books, and I have some videos also, can help them get that different perspective and grow that empathy and treat somebody differently. And then I have several early elementary neurodiversity text sets.
Yeah, and one of the things that I was thinking in that vein was, of course, take print these up and take them to your library, right? But things have been interesting in schools around the country, and in certain areas we have people that want to ban books. I'm sure your local school librarian would love to hear from people coming in with a positive message that want to add books to their library. So, I mean, these would be great to bring to your school, your district or school librarian as well. Wouldn't it be fantastic to have more of these books, not only in our public libraries, but in our school libraries? And of course, the other thing is a parent or an individual, as you mentioned, Connie. There's a lot of occasions where people might give a small gift to a teacher. Well, how about a book? How about getting more of these books in the classroom? So lots of potential here.
Yes. And so then I started upper elementary and middle school. I don't have high school yet. And then I also have disability video short sets because I love video shorts. And these are all short videos that you can use to teach or to build acceptance, build empathy. And then an adult lived experience of disability text set. So many good books out there. And then I also have a few, for those of you who love the autonomic nervous system as much as I do, I have books that teach about the feelings that are associated with each of the pathways. So I have those also. And
Fantastic.
Introspection text sets I have. And they're all downloadable. You can just download a PDF, print them off. So I have a text set on introspection, so how your body notices its signals and can attribute those to how you're feeling or your bodily states. I have a text set for adults because there's so many adults that don't know about that. And then also a text set for students to help teach them about it.
Fantastic. And again, I'll put your link again in the chat here so people can go to your website. But you've got a lot of great resources there. I was just thinking, kind of with back to school, wouldn't it be great? Maybe we can get a little bit of extra funding and do a little mini grant for some books for classrooms.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a great thing to be able to do?
I think that'd be great.
Yeah, and this can really have such a positive impact. I also love the discussion about and now I'm going to get the terminology backwards.
Well, I did. So
Yeah, but kind of the idea that yes, there's books that raise awareness, but there's books where they're and I'll let you say the term so I don't get it wrong, but there's books where it's really just about the character, and that the neurodivergence is not the focus, and I think that's really important. I mean, what we want to do is create a world that really is more accepting of all humans, regardless of our individual differences, which are, in fact, strengths. Yes, I love that distinction.
Yeah, me too. And that was very heavy in the research, how important it is to bring both of those together. You don't want just all inclusive literature where it's all about the disability or all about the difference. You want to make sure that it's just incidental for some characters.
I had a comment here from Chantel who said, ooh, we could think about doing a children's book study series. We've been doing a number of book studies at the Alliance on various books, and that's a great idea.
I even have reflection questions on each of the text sections.
Wow, you've done a tremendous amount of work. Yeah, that's great. So again, anybody that might have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. I just again want to encourage people to share this presentation, to think about how we can get more books with representation in our school libraries and our public libraries, and really these kinds of things can really make a positive difference. And how meaningful is it to be able to see yourself and to have positive reflections throughout literature. So this has really been a fantastic conversation. And, I knew when you presented this before that it was just such a great topic to get people thinking about, how we can make these kind of changes.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to link for people, because I have to just believe that a lot of this isn't happening because people don't know the impact. And that's why I think it's so important to start out with the impact of what happens if you don't feel like you belong, and how impactful it is not to see yourself represented in books. It impacts people in so many different ways, and I just think we need to share that a lot more. We're just not talking about it enough, I don't think.
Right. Yeah, and certainly those conversations have emerged over the years, and I think there have been some positive responses to that, but at the same time, sometimes they'll emerge in one facet without really kind of thinking this is universal. This is about all people feeling connected and part of something. It's not just okay, well, we want to focus on this one individual difference. So I think it's good to see progress, but there's a whole hell of a lot of progress that needs to be made here.
Yeah, exactly. And I just kind of had this aha moment when you were talking, but like when we go back to that definition of acceptance and belonging, and how that to really feel like you are accepted and you have a real strong sense of belonging means that you don't have to change to fit in. You can be your authentic self within that group of people. That's the kind of books that we want. If we have representation of neurodivergent characters who are trying to change themselves or who have to be fixed, or that representation is all about the medical model of disability, then we're not. That doesn't support that definition of true belonging and acceptance. And so it kind of is all linked, really.
Yeah, and so often, it is, as you kind of talked about early on. It's about forcing people to fit in, and it's always forcing for instance, in this case, a neurodivergent individual to have to fit into a neurotypical and I think the more understanding, awareness, normalization, exposure, all of these things that all kids have, I think the better, more compassionate, more understanding we're going to be. And I mean, I think, but, I think again, no one has done a service when people are not represented. And not
Absolutely.
represented in ways, I mean, and again, you touched on this, but not represented in ways where it's, you kind of tied it to the medical model, like, let's not focus on somebody being broken because they're different, or, so I mean, and even, kind of, you mentioned, and this has been the case over time with probably not only books, but a lot of films and other things where the child that was the individual that was different, that maybe neurodivergent or had a disability, was there only to build a story for how wonderful somebody that
Right.
wasn't was.
Right.
And that's really, I think, harmful.
Absolutely. And I think what we know, social emotional learning is taught by modeling. And if we're saying, I mean, I say this all the time, you might be saying you accept other people, but do your actions really align with that? Because
Right.
kids pick up on that, and kids pick up on that at a very young age. I think my daughter picked up on that. I mean, she has health concerns, and I think she picked up on that in kindergarten. Like,
Right.
you can say that you are here to meet the needs of all learners, but your actions don't say that, and kids
Right.
notice that. And so if we're saying those words and our classrooms don't have representation of the children that are in them, your actions aren't aligned with what you're saying, that's for sure. And kids
Right.
notice that.
Right. Yeah, I had shared a couple of things on the screen while you were talking, and one of them was that, and the kids notice when other kids are being left out, or when you're treating other kids differently. One of the other points that jumped out at me for a couple of reasons, but was that idea that this social pain caused by exclusion, similar to physical pain. And of course we deal a lot here with, not only seclusion, but different forms of exclusion that happen quite frequently. And, I think people often underestimate the impact that it has.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. And I don't think, like, people think that they're helping by removing them from a setting because their behaviors are so out of control. But then I'm like, you're kind of causing yourself to have more of what you don't want to have, because
Right.
the more excluded they are, the less they feel like they belong, the more behaviors you're going to see. And
Right.
so,
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
There's gotta be a
So,
different
this has been fantastic. I appreciate you taking some time to join us today, and want to thank you for bringing this topic, which I think is, I hope somehow can result in more libraries somewhere having more books. And to practice what I preach, I think I'll print a copy off and take it down to our local library and see what I can do. Maybe submit a copy to our school, who I'm sure after a lot of negative feedback would be probably happy to get something like this. So, I'm going to take a step, and I would ask others that are watching, think about what you might be able to do, because, these things really can make a difference. And with that, I just want to thank you for coming on today and sharing this presentation with us. Just want to ask if you have any final thoughts or anything you want to leave us with as we wrap things up.
No, it's been really fun. So thank you for having me on. I will make the change to the mistake I had, and I will send the slides over to you for anyone who wants them.
Okay, fantastic. So if you are interested in the slides, you're welcome, and I'll put my email address in the chat here. But you're welcome to send me an email, and Connie will share those. So I'd be happy to share those with you as well. And of course, going to the website and getting those downloadable lists would really be a great step for people as well. So think about what you can do. And with that, Connie, I'm going to thank you. I'm just going to mention here real quickly, and you can hang around for a second.
Sure.
Our next live event is coming up actually on the 27th. We're on a little different schedule right now because we had a couple of changes to our schedule, but we're going to be getting back to the every other week, although there are some more surprises in store with some presentations on weeks that we don't usually do this, but I believe that more is better. Next time, we're going to be talking to Jennifer Abinat, who is an amazing member of our community here at the Alliance. I've known Jennifer for several years, even well before she was officially part of the Alliance. She's been participating and helping with our book studies, but is an amazing individual that's going to be talking about trauma and its impact on individuals with neurodevelopmental differences. So be sure to join us then. And I just saw one last comment here from Ginger. Ginger, it's so good to have you here. Ginger said, I would love the slides. This is so inspiring about what needs to be done and what can be done. Mom of 2 exceptional needs kids here. And of course, not only mom, but I mean, Ginger, since, look what I have sitting on my desk here. I have a great little book here written by Ginger Healy. So from one change maker there to another, it's great to have you here. So Connie,
hey, I want to say one thing, guys.
Sure.
So since you're talking about trauma next week, there is a new series, with a character who has experienced trauma. I want to say they're early reader. They're not totally out yet, so I haven't been able to read them, but they're written by Dr. Connie. I might be saying her name wrong, but I can email it's MINECONKPAYIR. I love everything she has to say. She's a huge expert on trauma, I think in the UK.
Okay.
She is writing a chapter series with characters who experience trauma. So
Wow, that sounds fantastic.
I think they're going to be I'm really excited for them.
That's great. Yeah, if you can share that, and maybe we can get a share up on social media to share out with folks, that would be fantastic.
Will do.
Well, listen, thank you so much for being here, Connie. I want to thank everybody that joined us today for being part of this. And again, encourage you, we do these for you to share. Think about, think about what you can do. I'm going to try to hold myself accountable. So Connie, since you and I are in touch on a fairly regular basis, ask me, if I've sent this off to my school library and to my.
Well, I'm seeing you tomorrow at 9 a.m. So I'll ask you tomorrow.
That's right. So I may not have it done by then, but I promise it's on my list. I think it's a great idea. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we will see everybody again real soon. And thank you, Connie.
Bye.